Welcome, debtors and borrowers, to Bankruptcy Bailout, because debt ruins lives, not bankruptcy. My name is Matt Burkus. I'm a Colorado-based bankruptcy and student loan relief attorney. And today, being June 30th, no doubt you have heard by now that the Supreme Court has said that the Biden administration lacks authority to implement the carte blanche forgiveness program that it proposed last year. So that program was to forgive either $10,000 or $20,000 of student loan debt if your income was under a certain threshold. Well, the Supreme Court finally weighed in and said, no, sorry, executive branch, there's no law that either expressly or reasonably implies that you have the authority to do that. Now, this video here is not to do a deep dive into the legal reasoning of the Supreme Court, but let's just talk about the issue, because I called this as soon as the lawsuits were filed about what I thought was going to happen here, and I thought this was going to be the Supreme Court ruling. Even people within the Biden administration, had said that this program with the HEROES Act was sort of grasping at straws at the last minute to try to get something done with student loan forgiveness. But the Supreme Court has been fairly consistent in maintaining the checks and balances and separation of powers of the various branches of government. So here, the executive branch, the Biden administration, proposed an all-new forgiveness program. All right. Well, Congress never wrote a law saying that they could do that. Now, it's not that they have to write specifically that law, but there's no law that you could even reasonably interpret to say that, yeah, they have this authority, especially in light of the fact that student loan law has very specific forgiveness options, a whole bunch of them, really, specific forgiveness options. You can't imply from that suddenly the executive branch can write an executive order saying, okay, we're just going to forgive, $20,000 of student loan debt. Now, the Supreme Court didn't rule that student loan forgiveness is unconstitutional or anything like that. It just said that the executive branch doesn't have any legal authority to do that. So what's the remedy for that? Well, Congress would have to pass a law allowing for the forgiveness, the carte blanche forgiveness of student loan debt. That's where this program should have originated in Congress. Congress passes a law, president signs it, then you can have this sort of program. And the Supreme Court is saying that's what needed to happen here. By itself, the executive branch doesn't have the rulemaking authority nor the authority through executive order to implement this. Because after all, the executive branch only enforces the law. Congress writes the law, executive branch enforces the law. And there's no law that really authorizes the executive branch to just forgive student loan debt. So that's the short version of the legal opinion that the Supreme Court issued, and I kind of figured that's what it was going to be. So the real question is, well, what do you do now? Well, the student loans are going to go into repayment here August 31st. This Supreme Court decision is going to allow the various servicers to really ramp up and start getting people back on track. Now, the first part of good news is that it still should be the case that any student loan that is in default should be taken out of default. And we're talking federal student loans here, so just to be clear. But any federal student loan, because of prior executive orders and decisions by the Department of Education, they're basically going to pull any student loan that's in default out of default. All right, so that will allow you to get back onto some sort of repayment option, and that's what you really need to be thinking about doing, okay? I've been advising for years to try to avoid putting your loans in forbearance because economic hardship forbearance, the interest still accrues. All right, now we haven't had to worry about that with the COVID forbearance because they basically set the interest rate to zero and there's no accruing interest, but that's all going to change August 31st. So you need to start thinking about what you're going to do and start getting your paperwork in order, mainly your 2022 tax return. If you haven't filed it already, get it filed because that's what the servicers are going to want to see. And regardless of your situation, I implore you to get on at least one of the now 8 or so income-driven, that may be too many, 7 I think, income-driven repayment programs that are available if your income is low. Because the more recent ones now have a sliding scale. If your income's low enough, you don't even have to make a payment, but you want to be on the clock. You want the clock ticking on the time frame, whether it's 15 years, 20 years, 25 years, to get these loans forgiven when the time comes. All right, so get on the clock, get into repayment. Now, if you have the means, I suggest, or I recommend that people or borrowers try to prioritize student loan debt. I mean, one of the sins of the prior servicing of student loans, and just the student loan programs in general, is that it's so easy to sort of put the student loans into forbearance or downgrade them in your financial life. And I understand that. And, they aren't a priority. You may have, depending on your situation, you may have other priorities financially. But, these debts aren't going away, right? There's no program for forgiveness, so you're not going to get $10,000, $20,000 forgiveness. There's only been a minor loosening up of the bankruptcy option for student loans. I have another video that talks about that. But that's an administrative remedy that the Department of Justice is just saying they're going to be less strict about opposing student loan forgiveness. There hasn't really been a law change yet on bankruptcy discharge. So really that only leaves you as the primary forgiveness options is one of the income-driven repayments, or, again, if you're in public service, you get the public service loan forgiveness, which has had its ordeal, but that's really been cleaned up and is going to be easier to do for people that are in that program. So generally speaking, you want to be on some sort of repayment program, so at least the clock is ticking. Again, if your income is low enough, you're probably going to have a minimal payment or zero payment. All the student loans should be coming out of default status if they haven't already. So you won't have to worry about rehabilitating your loans or consolidating your loans. Most of the time frames for all that has passed. Now, that may not be the case for if you have legacy FFELP loans. I'm talking primarily about direct student loans. Hopefully a lot of you already consolidated your old FFELP loans into direct loans. But in any event, as far as what to do now is be proactive, get your tax returns filed if you haven't done so already, get in contact with whoever's going to be servicing your federal student loans, and get the paperwork going on getting on some sort of repayment option that makes sense for you and your situation so that you can start the clock on whatever program and on whatever forgiveness option makes sense. Now, if you have more complex issues with your student loans or need some guidance, of course, I offer initial consultations over the phone for that. I do charge for that service, obviously. I charge $169. But generally, the purpose of those consultations is really to get you the information you need and get you pointed in the right direction so you can resolve the situation yourself. But if it's something of particularly complex, then obviously we can offer our services to assist in that. And we also assist people with private student loans in trying to settle those out or get a resolution that makes sense for the borrower. Anyway, best of luck to you with your student loans. This is an unfortunate decision, but the expected decision out of the Supreme Court, given what has transpired. And unfortunately, student loans go back into repayment August 31st. My name is Matt Burkus, Colorado-based bankruptcy and student loan relief attorney. Best of luck to you.